Hey, everybody, it's Helen Hillix, and I'm your host today, as always, from my heart to yours. And I am so excited today to have a very special guest, Travis Barton. And I will be telling you more about him a little bit later. But I just realized today that the only reason I invite people on as guests is because they have as much of a passion and a mission to help change the world and have an impact on the world by helping people to heal and identify their own passions. And I definitely see that in Travis, and that's why I wanted him to be here. So I'll tell you more about him in a little bit, but he's part of the series about modern men and what it is like to be a modern man, what are the challenges of being a man in this modern era, with all the conflicting messages that you're supposed to be sensitive, you're supposed to be loving, you're supposed to be emotional, but don't quit your day job just because you're too sensitive to handle the corporate world, because I still want you to provide for me. So there are so many conflicting messages about how to be a man, and I couldn't think of anyone better to talk about it than Travis, who coaches a lot of people about that same topic. So let me tell you a little bit about Travis. He just recently was invited by a very popular app called Meditation Studio app to do one of their pep talks. And that was a real honor. And I'm sure he did a fabulous job. I have to listen to that. He's written the book, which is coming out. He has a podcast of his own. He does both life and business coaching. Barefoot Business is his tag. And I love that tag because it so expresses who Travis is about having travel and adventure and freedom in your life, as well as making money and doing what your passion is. So without further ado, I want to ask Travis to join us and say hi and tell us a little bit about himself.
Yeah, well, that was such an amazing intro. Thank you so much. I'm humbled and honored.
That's who you are.
The Barefoot Business thing, it's it did come from that feeling of, making a lot of money and enjoying your life are two things that are not diametrically opposed. You can actually, this is an old paradigm that a lot of people have. You have to hate what you're doing to make a ton of money. And this is my whole thing with Barefoot Businesses, teaching entrepreneurs that laptop lifestyle and all that fun stuff. So that's where that comes from. Yeah. And I'm always barefoot too. So what better name to call it, right? So
well, you're only going to be successful if you are who you are.
And I think that steps into, you were touching on, and we can touch on this a bit. What does it take to be a modern man or just a man? What is masculinity? And I think you nailed it there. It's just who you are. You have so many ideas running around about what we should be or how we should show up in the world or what showing up in the world powerfully is. And what we do in trying to strive towards that thing or that definition of what a extraordinary man is we lose touch of who we are. And I think that's sadness. So looking forward to touching on that.
That's awesome. So tell us just a little bit about how you came to be the Travis Barton that we all know and love.
I got 33 years of history. All of us, right?
A little thumbnail sketch of it.
Yeah. Man, I look back at the story of my life and I just wrote my book, and it was it was kind of a therapeutic process in doing this, but it was also so enlightening because you're going, oh, that's where that belief came from, or that's where that story came from, or that's why I'm so into adventure and travel. It's from this point when I was 6 years old when I was playing in the tree house and whatever. So the book is, it was a process writing that, and it started off as kind of how to discover your purpose, and then it turned into kind of my story with that. Anyway.
What's the name of your book?
It's called The Adventure of Purpose, and it's being published in the next couple, 2 to 3, 4 months or so.
Awesome.
Whenever the publishers want to do it. But yeah, my story, I've always been of a attitude of service. I've always had this kind of this heart of just wanting to show up powerfully in my life, encouraging others to show up powerfully in their life, testing the paradigms, testing the beliefs, testing their old stories, and jumping out of that. Even before I knew what coaching was, I've always done that. As a kid, I was always, why not? Right? But most kids kind of grow out of that. I never did, Oh, I always wanted to be this. well, why not? Really testing that, right? And so when I discovered what coaching was, it was just this very aha moment for me. It was like, when you really discover your purpose, it's like, that's what I'm supposed to do. This is what I'm supposed to, yes. And I remember, learning what coaching was. I was actually bartending at the time, which I think was probably the best training I've ever had to be a coach, was being a bartender. Were you really? You were as well?
A server and a bartender. Yeah. I say the same thing, Travis. I always say the same thing. That was my first job, about how to really relate to people and do it quickly and intuitively.
Yes. And I've done coach trainings, and I've had the best coaches train me, and I've done the best coach trainings, and I feel like my experience bartending was so impactful. And I was coaching behind the bar. People always used to say like, oh, your bartender's the best therapist. And I go, man, I wasn't a therapist, because I wouldn't just focus on the shit you were in. My question was always, how do we get you out of the shit? And I would always hold you at that, right? So week by week, I'd see the regulars come in. I go, did you talk to the wife? Like, did you do this? Did you book the trip? Like,
that's so awesome.
So I met a coach at a bar. I was working in the cigar lounge at the time, and he came in, and we shared travel stories for an entire day, smoking a cigar together. And he came in the next day. I go, what do you do for work that you're able to travel the world and do this? And he says, what did he say? He said, I help people's brains figure out how to get what their heart wants. He didn't say life coaching, but he said that, and I'm going, boom, done. I said, I don't know what that is. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't know the training I have to do. I don't know the study I have to do, but whatever that is, that's what I'm supposed to do. And that's what I'm going to do. And I never looked back. That's for me. That was the first day where, I always used to be worried about my purpose and what I was going to do with my life, and wake up in a cold sweat thinking about that. Right. And from that day on, I had never been worried about that. It's crazy.
That's such a great story, because it really proves your point about the adventure of finding your purpose. It always starts young. My story is very similar. People used to come to me to talk to me about their issues, or, to get support from a very young age. It's just like what I did naturally. So it's just natural. And I think everybody has that seed in them.
Absolutely. And and this is a kind of a problem that we all face, is we think of purpose as something that's kind of out there, right? Out there in the world, when it's just been kind of within you your entire life, right? And it's more about uncovering things that have been burdened on you, limiting beliefs, cultural pressures, societal expectations, things like this, than really adding more of that on. And oftentimes, in my own story, it was a lot of travel and exploration and my passions that spark the purpose. Things extrinsic of yourself can spark that inner aha moment. But what you typically find is it's always been there, right? You just oftentimes didn't look hard enough, or you were too clouded with judgments and other things to really effectively see it.
I love what you're saying, Travis, because what I hear you saying essentially is that you cannot force a purpose. It really has to come from something a gift that you have already been given from the universe.
In some way, in some way, right?
It may be developing that. It may be, of course, expanding that, preparing to do it out in the world. But it's something that you don't have to manufacture. You have it. Right,
and that's an important distinction, because a lot of people go, I don't know. Like I'm not really passionate about anything. I'm not very good at anything. And I would say, this the adventure of it. Just take that first step and explore. So that art of aimless kind of wondering, and just being present in what you're doing, but actively kind of aimless wondering, right? Pursuing your passions and interests, getting good at the things that you love, oftentimes leads the way to that kind of moment of awakening, going, that's it. That's what I'm supposed to do, right?
Marie Kondo is such a perfect example of that, with the magic art of tidying.
Yeah, sure.
She loved to organize, and she loved to get rid of things, and it's from a child, and look where she is. Who would have thought that tidying would be a thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And in this day and age, for people to still sit here and go like, oh, well, everybody knows you can't make money doing that. I go, man, are you kidding? Have you seen some of the crazy stuff going around on the internet? Like you can make whatever you want, man. Whatever you want. If you're passionate about it, if you're even a little interested in it, I guarantee you there's like countless amount of people out there who are also interested and passionate about it. Yeah. So
I want to switch gears and have you talk about your own evolution as a man. And what your thoughts are philosophically and practically about what it means to be a man in this modern era, the conflicting messages, how you've handled those.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think especially in this day and age, it's kind of becoming more of a topic.
Thank God.
Yeah, for me, it was, I guess growing up, when I grew up in the 80s and early 90s, you had like the machismo kind of like, that's the idea of what a man is, right? You suppress the emotions and you're supposed to be this stoic kind of, I don't think I ever really bought into that, even growing up. I never really did. And maybe a little kind of going through my
I was going to say, you couldn't have avoided that culture.
Right. Yeah. During my teenage years, there certainly was an element of like, that's what a man's supposed to be. And that's, but over time, especially in this day and age, we have the social media and everything, and we go, oh, I'm so influenced by this, and this is how I should be, and this is what a man's supposed to be, and this is how I should live my life, and this is what success looks like, and blah, 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 blah. So much influence. But the only thing that's really important is stepping into who you are authentically on the inside and having the courage to express that. And it's not about adjusting to something that you're not. It's about boldly tapping into who you already are and powerfully stepping into that. And I think that's the important distinction.
Personal experience of that, how you said that you got into that somewhat as a teenager, and what is the it, and how did you see your way through moving out of that?
A lot of fear, and a lot of courage. It was, like I said, there was a brief point where I kind of subscribed to that kind of mentality of this is what a guy is supposed to, how he's supposed to show up in the world. And you just shortly going through this, you start to realize, like, I'm not very fulfilled. I'm not very happy. This isn't who I am. I'm going through my life wearing a mask, pretending to be somebody that I'm not, trying to please people that don't even like me for who I am in the first place. It's exhausting. Try doing that, right? It's exhausting. And it was just, I think it was a point of saying, I'm just sick of it. I am who I am. I'm going to own my weird, as it were, and step into who I am. And that was the turning point for everything. And that changed my relationships. That changed, a huge part of my well-being and my happiness. Just being able to express who you are.
What is your weird, Travis? I want to get specific.
Man, I love that quite, because that's about, okay, I'll give you an example. I was wearing, I was at the gym a few weeks ago, and I was wearing a Batman shirt, right? And this lady walked up and she's like, oh, I don't see a lot of guys, it's just a Batman shirt, who cares, right? But it's just kind of having that kind of, just, I don't care. A lot of people would care about that. They'd say like, oh, I'm not going to allow like a 12-year-old kid wearing a Batman shirt to the gym, right? I just don't care because I want to wear a Batman shirt to the gym. It doesn't matter, right? But in doing that, would there be some woman who's going to say something and have something to say about it? Maybe, but I'm also kind of neglecting and putting up a barrier in front of the people who would like me for who I am in the first place, right? For who I really am.
So would you name that I have a very present element of me that is still a little boy that I like to give voice to?
There's always, I think everybody should. I mean, there's a massive amount of wisdom in our childhood selves. Massive amount. I always say.
But I'm asking for you, was that accurate? That
absolutely.
Boy part of you that you still want to give voice to and say, I don't give a shit what you think. This is me, buddy.
Yeah, I'm sure that is a huge part of it. Man, I always say there's only two people you ever need to impress in your life. It's your 5-year-old self and your 95-year-old self. That's it, man. If you could do that and impress those two people, you've done your job, right? Everybody else is gravy. They're either going to like you or they're not, right? Winston Churchill says, if you have enemies, that's good. It means you've stood for something at some point in your life.
Yes. Okay,
and I think that's actually a really good philosophy to live by as far as stepping into your masculinity and your manhood as well. Just who you are authentically as a person, right? Own who you are. Some people are going to like you. Some people won't. At the end of the day, it's not going to matter. As long as you like yourself.
Give me a description of who you are. I know that one part of you.
Wow.
I mean, I know you have a mission and a passion.
Yeah, that's not what I would say of me. That's a part of me, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm like Walt Whitman said, and I'm going to butcher this because
That's all right. I am awful at quotes, but go ahead.
I'll paraphrase him. So I am, I contain multitudes. There's a lot of nuance, and I'm loving, compassionate, adventurous, free-spirited, and just joyful. I mean, but that's amongst many, many other things, right? I think to not narrow yourself down to say, I am this. This is what I say, like, when you're at like a networking part, or not networking part, that'd be a bad example, but you're just hanging out with people and people say, what do you do? And people automatically go to their work. Like, that's the way they define themselves. Like, oh, I do accounts payable. It's like, that's how you define yourself, right? So I didn't ask what you do for work, right? I asked, what do you do? What makes you come alive? What are you passionate about? Who are you as a man or as a woman? Who are you as a person? That's infinite. I think that's so much more interesting. But we're in that trap too, where we do identify ourselves as what we do to make money. It's very interesting.
I totally agree with you there. And, where I come from around that issue is a pretty broad, it reminds me of what you're saying about Walt Whitman, that we are one. That's how I think of it on a spiritual level, and literally even on a physical level too. We are one. We're all made up of the same energy, life force. But I think of it that way because on the one hand, I think, what's it like to be a modern man? I think, part of that challenge is to allow yourself to be more than that one little limited defined aspect that society says you should be, and to allow that you are that multitude of things inside every one of us. We all are everything.
Yeah.
You want to get
Yeah, I am that. You read that book? I am that. I am you.
I haven't read that.
When you asked me that question, I don't know how weird you wanted to get into this, but yeah, when you say, who are you? You say, who are you? You go, you. Everything, right? You can easily go that way, right?
So, absolutely. And I think the more we do, the freer we are.
That's right. The more we acknowledge that and get clarity on that and understand that. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I had a little trouble with that idea, and I did not read that book, but I work with a spiritual teacher named Beth Green, who we talked about I am that, I don't know, decades ago. Mm-hmm. And the idea behind it is, don't separate yourself from the child molester, because you have used somebody else's weaknesses to hide your own pain at some point too.
I liked it. Yeah. So can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, that's the essence of child molester, is somebody who takes advantage of the vulnerability that somebody else has in order to hide their own pain. That's the generic, energetic definition of it. And, it's so easy for us to get into, oh, what an asshole, that fucking weirdo, that pervert, rather than saying, you know what, I have compassion for that person, because I know I have used the vulnerability of my sister, let's say, who wanted to be my best friend. And I've used her vulnerability to get her to do things for me, because that would make me feel more powerful, because I felt weak. I mean, and of course, it isn't exactly equivalent in terms of damage to the other person. Sure. But it's a way of saying, like that book says, I am that.
Yeah.
I am that. And, likewise, somebody who is way, beyond me, more brilliant, more powerful, more intuitive, I get to say, I am like that. Mm-hmm. I am that also. Mm-hmm. So it just, I don't know, to me, it expands our vision of who we are.
Yeah. Our awareness. And yeah, this is a journey I've been on for the last couple of years, and it's been remarkable, truly.
And of course, then as you expand your vision, on a very esoteric level, it also filters down to every other level. And then you can help your clients way more who have this part of them that maybe they did molest their sister when they were little out of sexual frustration and whatever, and you can say, I am that. We've all done things like that. That doesn't have to limit us from, from loving ourselves and moving forward. We get to make amends.
Sure.
Anyway,
Yeah. I hear you.
Back to the topic, what it's like, what your feelings and personal experiences are of being a man in this modern era. And that's where we started, was you said, in a way, you can't even define yourself as a man in this modern era, because in one way you're everything.
Yeah. And, I don't want to be that guy that's like, who are you? And you go, well, it can come off kind of pretentious, but no, it's just, there's a lot of, I don't know, to define yourself as like one thing. It's so, man. It's just crazy.
I love it, actually. I love it. I don't think you're coming across as pretentious at all. I think you're coming across.
Well, no, I don't think, yeah. I can see how it could.
I want to bust out of that whole fucking paradigm.
Yeah.
That's how I hear you saying. I want to bust out of that.
This is how we should show up. This is how we should be. This is who you should become. This is what's appropriate. It says who, man. It says who. For a lot of people, the way they live and the way they show up in the world is an accident of time and geology, right? Where we're born, at what time, when, and then who you become and how you show up as a man or as a woman is created from a history of other people in that area or that time.
The Holocaust.
Right? What about that? What about it?
For instance, what an unbelievable impact if you were born during that year. You were born Jewish.
Think about Viktor Frankl. He wrote that book, Man's Search for Meaning. Have you read this?
Yeah.
In a concentration camp, experiencing these things, and it's a fantastic book. If you're looking for purpose, or you're looking for shifting mindset and cultivating more powerful beliefs despite all the circumstances around you, and identifying who you really are from the inside out rather than the outside in, that is one of the pinnacles. I mean, that's a book. When I read that, it was damn mind-blowing, right? So that book is truly, if your audience is listening to this and have not read that, what are you waiting for? Go to Amazon right now, go to your bookstore, pick that book up. Fantastic.
It reminds me of It's a Beautiful Life. That
Yeah, what a great film. That's right. Yeah, I haven't seen that in years.
I haven't either, but when you said that, it just gave me chills, literal chills about that, about how so much of it is what you choose to focus on.
Yeah. Well, it's not our circumstances that define us as people. It's I don't even think it's a reaction to our circumstances, but it's our response to our circumstances around us that defines us as people. And to have that presence of mind to not react, but instead to respond, takes a lot of mindfulness, and it takes a lot of clarity on understanding, right? That I am not that. I am not that circumstance. And I think that's probably one of the most powerful practices that you can have as a person in stepping into the world as who you really are on an authentic level. Because we're so wired to, and we're so triggered to just react negatively to everything around us, or in a certain way to everything around us. But when we slow down and we acknowledge that kind of primal instinct of that reaction, we slow down and we create space between that thought and the next one. And that space right there is our real authenticity coming through. And every moment, every decision that we spend out of integrity with who we are is creating a bigger gap between who we really are and, what our circumstances are defining us to be.
I love it. I love what you're saying. And as all things are so paradoxical, in one moment we're talking about I am that, and the next moment we're talking about I am not that. And I don't see those things as oppositional. I see, I am that with everything, and yet I get to differentiate.
Yeah.
Get to differentiate from that which does not serve me. Mm-hmm. Yes, I may have that tendency to use other people to hide my own pain, even though I've never molested a child, but I get to differentiate from that That's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
aspect.
and I certainly think that's playing in the you know, what's the old saying, we are spiritual beings having a human experience, right? I am that. That's our spiritual experience. I am everything. That's our spiritual experience. The human experience, you know, we got to remember to have that. And that's differentiating, like, between the other people having their own human experience. And I'm not that experience. I'm my own. And again, living from the inside out from that.
I choose to focus my energy somewhere else.
Yeah,
And
choose choice. Everybody's got a choice. We create our own reality.
well, I don't know whether this is opposing what you're saying. I mean, I definitely get we create our own reality, and yet the universe has a say in it. I am in a traffic jam and I am intending to get there on time, but the traffic jam may intervene and I'm not going to get there in time.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Of
And I
course.
respond
Again,
to
that's
that.
choosing to respond to it in a powerful way rather than reacting to it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And of course, how that ties back into what it means to be a man in this modern era is you get to choose and you get to realize when you are just reacting to your upbringing or the cultural norm or whatever, and you get to put some space in there and think, is this who I authentically am?
Yeah, yeah, and a great way to do that is to, again, how many people have gone back and looked at the story of their life and saying, okay, who am I here? How am I showing up in the world? What are the beliefs that I have? What are my values at this point in my life? Where do these come from? Unless I consciously chose these beliefs and consciously chose the values and how I'm showing up, they're adopted from somewhere else. You learn them from a father, what masculinity is. You adopted it from watching James Bond as a kid, something,
Right.
whatever that is.
Batman.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, Batman, right? But to take a step back, look at the story of your life and see, oh, that's where that belief was adopted. Adopted, right? It didn't come from me. It was adopted, right? Every belief. And if you have learned beliefs in your life, borrowed beliefs from other people, you can unlearn them as well, right? That doesn't define who you are. That's just something that you're kind of carrying with you, again, as an accident usually of geology and time, usually, right? And your circumstances in your life.
Yeah, I don't think there's any if you have learned beliefs.
Everybody does, right? Everybody does. You and I do, absolutely. Sure.
We are pretty much a compilation of those learned beliefs.
Totally.
So what I hear you saying is, that one thing that men can do is to expand themselves to include every characteristic of humanity.
Well, if you want to get like really practical about it as well, I think it's there's been a paradigm that's only kind of recently been kind of uprooted, which is I need to be this, strong, person on the outside that holds it together and can't express myself or my emotions or whatever. There's this kind of paradigm that's been kind of shifted in the last, decade or so. Really, that's what I'm seeing. And having more of the permission to kind of express ourselves emotionally, and tap into that side of us a bit more. That's what I'm noticing. I'm
completely in agreement. I'm 69 years old. My husband is 72. And, it's been interesting watching him evolve over the past 12 years that we've been together. And of course, he is Italian from Chicago.
Oh, sure.
Raised Catholic with all that shame about, who you are. And I'm just bringing him up as an example of how men are shifting, exactly what you're saying, and owning he is a very sensitive man, very intuitive, very spiritual. In our couple, I'm the more macho one, actually. And, that's okay. That's okay.
It is okay. We've just been told over the course of centuries that it's not, right?
Exactly. I'm the one changing the garbage disposal and, organizing the stuff for the car.
Awesome.
I mean, and I love doing that. I've always loved that, and when I was a kid, it was like, you're too intense. You're too much this or that or the other thing. And, it's the same kind of thing. And I'm bringing this up partly because as men are liberated, so are women. As women are liberated, so are men.
Right.
Because it's not in a vacuum. You know, I can't support you as a man to be all of who you are if I'm not challenging myself to be all of who I am.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said something there too. You growing up and you hear things like you're too intense. So most people, what they do is they adopt that idea of I'm too intense. I need to rein it in. When in reality, what the other person was saying is you're too intense for me. Right. So what you accept into your life is I'm too intense and I gotta really edit who I am as a person.
Yeah, which is what I did for a long time.
Right.
So what challenges like that? Have there been any challenges like that you have overcome personally? You know, mine was keeping myself small and so that I would be appealing and attractive and
that was I used to go through life, man, I didn't want to step on anybody's toes. I edited myself to make everybody kind of happy, but in doing that, I wasn't ever really making anybody happy and editing who I was, and I certainly wasn't making myself happy. And it was the understanding that in the steps in really just expressing myself as who I was without that kind of filter of, oh, what are people going to think of me? Because that held me back so long. What are people going to think of me? Right. And so the permission, again, and that's living from the outside in.
Right.
As Joseph Campbell says, you're letting the editor do his work before you're letting the artist come out and play. And it was important to make that distinction and to understand that that's kind of how I was kind of showing up in the world. And when I started to kind of let the artist come out into play, and first, that's powerful. And I started to realize the stories I made up in my own head, what are people going to think of me? It wasn't even that bad. It wasn't even a big deal, right? So it's all these stories I made up in my head that it would be a big deal, and it just wasn't. So that was a freeing step for me.
I love that story. You know, it's so common, isn't it? I mean, it's so common that the story that we make up about the thing that we're blocked from doing is so often a non-issue once it's done.
Right.
Even if it is, I mean, one of the things that, this sounds so crazy, but one of the things that
we've been talking about non-duality. I don't think anything that you get.
All right.
Yeah, let's do it.
You know, this sounds so crazy though, because it's something that impacted me so much was the movie Open Range.
The cartoon?
No, it was a Western movie with Kevin Costner and Robert Duvall. Anyway, it's not about that. It's one of the things that Kevin Costner says in this Western is there's things that prey on a man's soul worse than dying.
Yeah.
And that just blew my mind, because I've always been afraid of dying before that. And all of a sudden I realized, who gives a shit if I die?
Well, everybody's going to.
I know, but even tomorrow, who gives a shit if I die? It's like I'm going to live. And you can't, if you have that fear, and I'm saying this just to connect to what you were saying about, once you do it, it's like that's what we're really afraid of, is that we're going to die from being thrown out of the tribe because we carry that primitive fear from the caveman days.
Yeah.
And so it's so once I realized there's a lot worse things in life than dying, I thought, oh my God, I'm free. I'm free. I who cares?
Yeah.
And I die, then at least I lived.
Yeah. You had the experience of living. Right. And that's, it's a beautiful thing. Any time spent is a gift. And I'd add to that, I think a lot of people say life's too short. And I think the mortality that a lot of people fear isn't so much, I don't think it's so much mortality and death. It is living a life unfulfilled and living a life inauthentic to who they are and living a life without passion. That's where the fear comes from. And I would say it's not that life is too short. It's just that we wait too long to start living. And that's what it is. Everybody's going to die. We all know that. But the real fear comes in is looking back on our deathbed, looking back on our life and saying, well, what if? what if I did that? Or
Yeah.
having those huge regrets. That's the big fear.
Well, but I think the thing that keeps us from jumping off the cliff and quitting that job and whatever it is the fear ultimately of dying. So it's like they're again, it's a paradox. They're both true. We're terrified of not living, but we don't embrace the risks that would allow us to live because we're afraid of some catastrophic thing happening. If
That we make up in our heads, right? That
exactly,
it's like
we make up in our heads.
massive, yeah. So, but we use fear as this kind of a reactionary thing. We base our decisions in life off of fear. And as a result, avoidance, it's a purely avoidance-based life. I'm scared of this thing, so I'm going to avoid it. But fear is a mask for desire. Fear is your direction, not your departure, right? So if you're scared of something, if I'm scared of quitting the job, there's a desire behind that. Like, what's the desire behind that? And finding that and having the courage to step into that. Everybody's scared of something. If you're not scared, you're either 6 feet under or you're a psychopath. Right?
You know,
most people live in the fear, and they sit in that fear, and they let the fear dictate their decisions. They play their life in the realm of probability. What's probable? What is easy? What is everybody else doing? And they base their decisions on probability.
And self-protection.
But if instead we change the way you see your world. That's all you got to do. I'm not asking anybody to go quit their jobs today, but just start changing the way you see your world. Quit playing in the realm of probability and start thinking in the realm of possibility, right? So shift the way you're starting to see things, right? And ask yourself, okay, I'm scared of this thing. Why? What is this a mask for? What's the desire behind this fear? Start looking at your fears logically instead of illogically, because when we finally start looking at our fears logically, what do we see? It's usually nothing more than this unfounded kind of concept of our imagination that prevents us from really living fully, right? So if we can really change the way we see our world and look at our fear that way and start playing in possibility, just switch the little brain there just a bit and start seeing the world that way, and you're going to start to see possibility and potential in your life instead of just playing that tiny little realm of probability. Probability leads to sitting on your deathbed going, what if? Possibility
absolutely
leads to you looking back on your deathbed and saying, hell yes, what a ride, you know? Oh my God, yeah, I got scraped knees. Yeah, I got a little bruises. Yeah, I got a little cuts. But holy shit, that was fun, right? Probability and basing our life decisions on fear, it might be a little comfortable extrinsically, like we're in a comfortable kind of place, but we're living in stagnation.
Yeah, absolutely. Two things I want to say. One of them I forgot already. The other one I didn't forget, so I'm going to say it, and then I'll maybe remember the other one. Oh yeah, the first one is I want to feel all used up when I die. I am going to feel all used up when I die. And the second one is I wanted to go back to a point you made earlier about that you recommend to your clients is to write your life story, to give yourself the space to become aware of the influences that have blocked you so far. And, because awareness, and again, this goes back to the whole thing of what does it take to be a man in this modern era? It starts with awareness.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to look at yourself and say, you know what, this is not the life I want to live, and this is not the man I want to be. It's got to start with that awareness. So I love that point that you made, and I didn't get a chance to accentuate it, but I love that. And that's kind of your whole theme running through, is become aware, of what's between the stimulus and the reaction and response.
Yeah.
And to be mindful of the choices that you're making, and to learn all these skills and liberate yourself so you can live in possibility. I know we need to wrap this up. I feel like you and I could talk for 100 years. I love the conversation. I love you. I'm so grateful that you came on the show today. I love what you're doing. I'd like you to talk a little bit about your podcast, your book, what you're up to, and how the listeners can get in touch with you.
Yeah, wow. Podcast is Living the Dream with Travis Barton. Got some epic interviews on there already. I sit and I have what I call campfire conversations. It's my excuse to talk to really cool people. So I just invite them on my show, and it's like a campfire conversation. It's like, those conversations where you're sitting by a campfire under the stars, maybe some pine trees around you, and you're sitting with, this bottle of wine, you're sharing these deep philosophical, life-changing conversations around this campfire, and those conversations that you never forget for the rest of your life. So it's not only how I typically talk about how my coaching sessions work. But it's a lot of that podcast. So Living the Dream with Travis Barton. I got a couple of good interviews coming up. Christine Hassler is coming up on that one pretty soon, so I'm stoked on that. The book is The Adventure of Purpose. It's a guide and story on how to discover your purpose, live a life aligned with your passions, and create a life you love. That's coming out in the next few months, according to the publisher. I've been waiting forever.
I bought my pre-publishing copy, so I'm waiting for that.
You're getting an autographed copy if you pre-order, everyone.
Awesome.
So I'm doing that. That's coming out soon. I got a program I'm launching this summer for coaches. That's Barefoot Business, what we're talking about. It's for coaches who want to create a life they don't need a vacation from. It talks about, having a thriving, prosperous coaching practice and how to do it with integrity and authenticity, which is exactly what we've been talking about here, and how to do that as a coach. There's something I'm passionate about as I built my business on integrity and not being a slimy, greasy salesman, which is a lot of coaches and I think personal brand and entrepreneurs feel like there's a kind of a thing holding them back. They're like, oh, I got to step in that sales switch. You don't have to. That's what I kind of pride myself in doing there. I don't know if you had any other questions. I think that was it. Yeah.
Reach you. How can people find you? At Travis Barton, at Trav Barton. I can't remember
you go travisbartonlife.com. There's a free gift there right now. It's on discovering your core values. So if you just go on the website, you get that free gift. You can check it out, all the stuff I'm up to, all that fun stuff. Find me. My favorite is probably Instagram at Trav Barton. And of course, I'm on Facebook too. I think everybody's on Facebook. So Instagram at Trav Barton and Twitter and all that fun stuff. So yeah, just say hello. Let me know the insight you got from the conversation. I'd love to hear from you.
Okay. And I want to say, as a follower of yours, that you are so responsive, so connected to your audience. And I really have always appreciated that about you. That, as you're getting more and more popular and tens of thousands of people are following you, you still take the time to connect to people. And I love that about you, and that I feel that is your integrity. So I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today, Travis. I wish you all the best. I know you're going to continue to thrive and flourish and offer your gifts to the world, and you're going to help make the world a better place.
Hey, you too. How much fun was today, right? So good.
It was so much fun.
Absolutely.
I really enjoyed it. So I'm giving you a big hug. Thank you so much. And I love you. And I love my audience. And I'm sure I'll have you back on the show at some point.
Yeah, I'd love to. Definitely.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Much love. Hey, thanks so much.